All right, today is the first day of Unit 7. Your objective is the students will learn the meaning of interest and principal in order to calculate simple interest and future value. So there's two things that we're going to calculate today, and we're going to have two different formulas. Your first section is you definitely want to make sure you get some of the vocabulary down for this particular lesson. There could be a vocabulary section on your test or your quiz. So the first thing you want to do is interest. Interest is the dollar amount, so I'm going to put a little note that that's in dollars. The dollar amount we get paid for lending or borrowing. So again, if you lend money to somebody, you typically should charge them interest. And if you borrow money from somebody, say the bank charges you interest. Principal is the initial amount of money we deposit or borrow. So this is also in dollars. So when you calculate the principal, you want to make sure you have a dollar label sign. The rate is given as a percent. It varies from bank to bank, which is why you typically like to shop around when you're finding loans, and the length of time for which the money is deposited, borrowed. It's assumed to be per year. So sometimes the problems might be in months. You'll have to convert into years. Simple interest is interest calculated on the principal only. So again, this is going to be in dollar amounts. Okay, and then future value is when the loan is repaid, the interest is added to the original principal to find the total amount due or charged. So this is basically the bigger amount of money typically, what you have to end up paying, because you have to obviously pay for the principal. So if you want to borrow $500, you're going to have to pay $500, and then the future value adds in the interest you would have to pay. The present value is just the principal borrowed or charged. And then this next one is a little more complicated. It's called the discounted loan. And some lenders collect the interest from the amount of the loan at the time the loan is made. So they'll collect the interest in the beginning. This is called a discounted loan. The interest is then deducted from that loan and is called the discount. So I think I forgot a word. And is the discount. Okay? So the two formulas you're going to need to know for this unit are simple interest. So that formula is I equals principal times rate times time. And then future value is represented by A equals principal times 1 plus the rate times T. Okay? So those are going to be very handy formulas. So what I'm going to do is go through an example of each problem you're going to see. Okay, we don't need this slide anymore. And then I will take questions if you have any as we move on. Okay? So I suggest using a highlighter to highlight what the question is actually asking. So in number 1, it says, find the simple interest earned for $4,350 invested for 18 months at 3.3 interest. So the actual question here is to find the simple interest. Okay? So we're going to use our simple interest formula, which is I equals P times R times T. So the principal is the initial amount you earn or you invest or you borrow. In this case, it's going to be $4,350. R is your rate as a decimal, so 3.14% interest is represented like this, and then remember you move the decimal 2 points to the left. So our rate is going to be 0.0325. And then your T is time in years, so it's 18 months, so you're going to have to do 18 divided by 12. which simplifies to 3 over 2. So you could use 3 over 2 or 1.5. Okay, so all I'm going to do is show my substitution. Again, we're finding the simple interest. And as you know, I like to use parentheses around everything. Okay, so to borrow that amount of money at that rate and for that time, you would have to pay $212.06. Okay, so that's a very basic level 1 type question you'll be having to do. Again, you want to kind of highlight and determine what the question is asking first. Okay? All right, moving on to number 2. So we have, what do we have here? A loan of $2,250 has been repaid at a rate of 7 1/8% after 9 months. Find the total amount that must be repaid. Okay, so this is find the total amount that must be repaid. So that's the actual amount that you end up paying. So that's another word for future value, if you want to put that in there. So you want to figure out how much you have to totally pay. Okay, so that formula would be A equals P times 1 plus RT. Okay, so the principal is the initial amount of the loan, which is $2,250. Okay, the rate is the percent as a decimal. So if you come over here, 7 1/8 is really 7.125, and you have to move your decimal, so it ends up being 0.07125. Okay, and then 9 months, you need to put this in years. So 9 out of 12 is, you could use 3/4 or 0.75. Okay? And then you're just going to substitute. So substitution would be A equals your principal times 1 plus your rate times your time. So you could put this all in on your calculator at once. If you do, you want to check to make sure you get this answer. $2,279.11. So in order to borrow that amount of money at that rate for that amount of time, the total you end up paying is $279.11. If you wanted to find the actual interest, so how much of that money was just fees they charge, you would do A minus the principal, so your total, minus the amount of the loan. And that would actually just give you the amount of dollars that was paid for interest. Okay, so just to borrow the loan, that's how much you would pay. And you could do that calculation if you wanted to. Okay? All right, number 3 is a little trickier, so please make sure you hardcore pay attention. After 15 months, $2,860 is repaid on a loan which had an original principal of $2,600. And in this case, we want to find the interest rate, so we want to find R. Okay? So remember I said the future value is typically the bigger number. So in this case, we repaid $2,860. So that's the total amount of money we had to pay to borrow $2,600. So that was our original principal. Okay? Then 15 months, is really 1.25 years, or you could put it as a fraction, doesn't matter. Okay, and then this time we have to solve for r. So we're going to have to do a little bit of algebra. So let's do 2,860 equals 2,000. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even put the formula I was going to use. So I definitely have to use this formula because we have a future value. Okay. Times 1 plus, and we can kind of move this around because we typically put the number first, 1.25 r. From here it's just a multi-step equation, so you distribute. Okay. Okay, and again we're solving for r. So then you would subtract 2,600 from both sides and you get to this. 260 equals 3,250 r. And you divide both sides by 3,250. Now you're going to get a decimal. So you should be getting 0.08 equals r. We have to put that back into a percent, so we have to go 1, 2 in the other direction, and we get 8%. Okay? So you've seen 3 different types of questions. You've seen the simple interest, calculating simple interest, calculating future value, and calculating the interest rate. So I would say, as of now, number 3 was probably the most difficult. You do have to make sure, maybe put a star next to make sure that when you get your R, you have to go back and move the decimal 2 units to the right to put it back into a percent. Okay? And last but certainly not least is the discounted loan. So that's when you pay the interest in the beginning. Okay? So they don't charge you anything for, they basically charge you less on the principal because you've already paid some money. So the loan's discount that's called the discounted loan. Or, I'm sorry, not discount, deducted interest. So how much interest we're going to pay in the beginning. So I'd make that note that that's what is happening, is we're going to find the interest we're going to pay in the beginning of the loan. So we're borrowing $12,000 at 8%, so I'm going to go 2 units to the left to put it into a decimal. And 10 months is 5/6 years, which you could also write that as a decimal, but I'm showing multiple different ways. Okay? So we just use this formula, I equals PRT. So we're going to do 12,000 0.08. So I would practice doing this multiplication because you want to make sure you get $800 is how much interest we're going to pay in the beginning. Okay? So then determine the net amount of money we receive. So we're obviously borrowing money. So that is the amount of the loan minus the interest you're going to pay. So minus the discount. Okay, so the amount of the loan was $12,000, and we already paid $800 in interest, so we will be receiving $11,200. Okay, and so then they want to calculate the actual interest rate using our numbers. Okay, so here's where it gets a little tricky. We're going to use this formula, okay, and the interest is what we initially paid. We subtracted that because we already paid it. So the I is 800. The principal is the amount of money we actually received. So we received 11,200. We don't know the rate, but we do know the time is 5/6 of a year. Okay, so multiply through, leaving your variables, so do that multiplication. Comes to this, and you should be checking on your calculator. And then to solve for R, divide everything. And we're going to have to round. So I got R equals 0.085. So you could go this way and say it's 8.5%, or I would also probably accept 9%, but typically you do have a 0.5%. So in real world examples, you'll see the 8.5. You won't have to round it. Okay? So I have gone over 4 different examples that you will see. Some keys to point out is making sure you highlight what you're trying to find. It might be a good idea to write the initial formula down and to make sure you substitute in correctly. So what you need to do is, hopefully you've completed the notes on pages 1 and 2. There's a classwork, and then we are going to have closure, and I'll put the time up once we get closer.